A millionaire owner of a luxury hotel was paralyzed when she saw the bracelet worn by the new maid, which was identical to the necklace her daughter had worn when she disappeared years ago as a baby. But what she discovered left everyone terrified. Eliza, a young woman of only 18, looked around the Grand Hotel nervously. It was her first day working at the luxurious Cooper Hotel, a place she never imagined being, except perhaps in dreams. Raised in an orphanage since she was 3 years old, Eliza always knew she would have to fight for what she wanted, and she wanted a better life, far from the shadows of her past. As she walked through the wide, elegant corridors, her mind returned to the small suitcase she had brought with her. Everything she owned fit inside. The maid's uniform still smelled new, and Eliza tried hard not to show how anxious she was. Every detail of the hotel seemed designed to impress, and she feared that at any moment she might do something wrong. "Hello, how are you? You must be the new maid," said a gentle but firm voice that made her nervous for a moment. It was one of the supervisors, an older woman with watchful eyes and a friendly smile. "I'm Clarice. Come on. I'll show you what you need to do." Eliza nodded, trying to hide the trembling in her hands. She followed Clarice, absorbing every instruction that was given. She knew she couldn't afford to make mistakes. Every day of work, there was a chance to prove herself, to show that despite the circumstances of her life, she was capable of great things. As she cleaned the rooms, arranged the silk sheets, and polished the antique furniture, her mind wandered to the reason she had taken the job. It wasn't just about survival. Eliza wanted more. She wanted to find her place in the world. Deep down, a small flame of hope burned. Perhaps in some way, that hotel was the beginning of something bigger in her life. Eliza had barely begun to adapt to her new routine at the hotel when Louis Cooper, the stern brother of the hotel owner, Harper, and the manager of the place, appeared to inspect her work. Louis was a middle-aged man with a rigid posture and an almost always stern expression. His dark eyes missed nothing, and his firm stride spoke of unquestionable authority. "This is far from the standard we expect here, Miss Eliza," said Louis, his voice as sharp as a blade. He held one of the sheets she had just folded, shaking his head in disapproval. "If you want to keep working here, you'll need to improve, a lot." Eliza swallowed hard, feeling her face burn with shame and frustration. I'm sorry, sir. I'll redo everything right away," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the knot forming in her throat. "Apologies won't do," Louis continued, ignoring the obvious nervousness in the young woman. "We don't have room for mistakes here. Every detail matters." She knew that working there would be challenging, but Louis's relentless criticism made her question whether she would ever fit in there. It wasn't just his tone of voice, but the cold look that seemed to pierce through her as if she were just another disposable employee. As he walked away, still muttering something about the importance of flawless service, Eliza felt a wave of discouragement, but at the same time, a spark of determination ignited in her chest. If Louis thought he could break her with his harsh words, he was mistaken. She would prove him wrong, even if it was the last thing she did. The hours passed slowly, but Eliza remained steadfast, determined not to give up. When she finished her first shift, exhausted, she looked at the enormous building and sighed. One day of work had passed and many more were to come. As she retreated to the small room they had given her at the hotel, Eliza revisited every detail of the day. Louis had been tough, yes, but he wasn't invincible. She needed to be better, faster, more careful. Perhaps if she proved herself competent, he would finally see her as someone worthy of respect. Determined to change that perception, Eliza closed her eyes, knowing that the next day would be another opportunity to show Louis and herself that she had what it took to be there. Determined not to be discouraged by Louis's criticisms, Eliza woke up early the next day, even before the first rays of the sun crossed the hotel's windows. She mentally reviewed the instructions she had received, remembering the manager's harsh words. She knew that this job was her chance to change her life, and she wouldn't let one man's opinion destroy her dream. As she made the beds, her care was doubled. Eliza ensured that every sheet was perfectly aligned, the pillows without a single crease, and the furniture shining like mirrors. Her watchful eyes scanned every detail, her mind focused on one mission, proving her competence. However, it didn't take long for Louis to reappear. He entered one of the rooms she had just cleaned, his stern gaze analyzing every corner. Eliza held her breath, waiting for the next critique. This time, Louis stayed silent for a few seconds, which made her even more nervous. Better, he finally said, in a tone that wasn't exactly a compliment, but neither was it a reprimand. There's still room for improvement, Miss Eliza. Remember, we don't strive for good here, but for impeccable. Yes, sir, I understand, Eliza replied, her voice a bit firmer now. She knew she had done well, but the weight of Louis's words still rested on her shoulders. He wasn't willing to give her the benefit of the doubt so easily, and she would have to work even harder to earn it. After hours of hard work, when she finally had a moment to herself, Eliza went to the hotel's garden. It was a peaceful place, full of flowers and trees that created a refuge away from the luxury and rigidity of the hotel walls. The garden was like a hidden paradise, with its colorful flowers and the gentle sound of a fountain in the background. There, the pressures of the hotel seemed to dissipate, leaving space only for her thoughts. She sat on a bench, the smell of the flowers around her bringing her a rare moment of peace. As she watched the flowers sway in the wind, a promise formed in her heart. No matter how many times Louis criticized her, how many sleepless nights she spent worrying about work, she would prove herself, not just to him, but to herself. Eliza knew she was strong, and that every challenge was just another opportunity to show that strength. I need to believe in myself, she whispered to herself, as if the trees around could hear and keep her secrets. The silence of the garden was comforting, a stark contrast to the tense and heavy atmosphere inside the hotel. It was there that she allowed herself to dream, where the harsh reality mixed with hope. As she looked at the flowers, Eliza thought about how life could also be fragile, like each petal that fell at the slightest touch. Yet these same flowers were also resilient, blooming again with each season. Perhaps she was like those flowers, small, but capable of flourishing amidst difficulties. I want more, she continued, now in a low voice, as if reaffirming her determination. I won't let anything or anyone stop me from building the life I want. The garden had become more than just a refuge. It was the place where Eliza renewed her strength. Each visit to the garden reminded her why she was there, how much she had fought to reach that moment. With each passing day, her determination grew stronger, taking root like the plants around her. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps pulled her out of her thoughts. Eliza looked back and saw a familiar figure approaching. It was Clarice, the supervisor. The woman approached slowly, sitting next to Eliza, her eyes admiring the garden with the same appreciation. This place is special, isn't it? Clarice commented, smiling softly. Yes, very, Eliza replied with a small smile. It reminds me that no matter how hard it is, there's always beauty if we know where to look. Clarice nodded, looking at the young woman with an expression of understanding. You have something special, Eliza. Keep believing in yourself, and you'll see how the world can change around you. The sun was beginning to set when Harper and Nathan Cooper returned to the hotel after a long business trip. The couple entered the lobby, exuding the natural elegance of those accustomed to luxury and power. Harper, a woman with a firm gaze and an imposing posture, observed everything around her attentively, as if absorbing every detail that had changed in her absence. Nathan, her husband, walked beside her, discussing hotel matters in a low voice. They were pleased to be back home, but Harper, as always, kept her eyes sharp, ready to spot anything out of place. As they passed through the lobby, she noticed a new employee, a young woman with brown hair who looked a bit nervous as she prepared to go upstairs with a cleaning trolley. Harper slowed her pace, watching the girl more closely. There was something about that young woman that caught her attention in an inexplicable way. Perhaps it was the way she kept her head down, or the humble way she carried herself in the uniform. But when the young woman turned slightly to greet them with a timid nod, Harper felt her heart stop for a moment. Her eyes fixed on the girl's wrist, a thin bracelet with a pendant that shone in the soft light of the lobby. Harper froze, the blood draining from her face. That bracelet. She knew it. Every detail, every curve of that pendant was etched in her memory. It was identical to the necklace her daughter Evelyn wore when she disappeared so many years ago. "Harper." Nathan's concerned voice sounded beside her, pulling her back to the present. He had noticed the sudden change in his wife's expression. "Is everything all right?" I'm fine," Harper replied, her voice little more than a whisper. She could barely take her eyes off the bracelet on the young maid's wrist, now walking down the hallway towards the rooms. Nathan watched her with concern and curiosity, but before he could ask anything else, Harper composed herself. "Nathan, I need to check on something. I'll speak with Lewis. I'll be right back." Without waiting for a response, Harper turned and walked quickly down the hallway, the sound of her heels echoing on the marble floor. She couldn't think of anything else but that bracelet. Could it be? Could that young woman be somehow connected to her lost daughter? Harper's heart pounded as she followed the maid's steps, keeping a certain distance so as not to be noticed. Something inside her, a flame she thought had been extinguished years ago, began to ignite again. She needed to know more. She needed to find out who that girl was and how she had come by that bracelet. Each step brought her closer to a truth she never expected to encounter again. That same night, Harper barely slept. The image of the bracelet on Eliza's wrist kept haunting her thoughts, invading her dreams, and turning them into a whirlwind of confused emotions. In the early morning hours, while Nathan slept peacefully beside her, Harper got up, wrapped in a silk robe, and headed to her office. There, in the comforting silence of the room, she made a decision. The next day, Harper began her investigation discreetly. She knew she couldn't raise suspicions, especially with Lewis, who had strict control over all the hotel staff. Instead of confronting the young woman directly, Harper decided to start where she could get more answers: the hiring records. That afternoon, while the hotel business went on as usual, Harper headed to the administrative office. With a casual excuse, she requested access to the recent employee files. "I'm just reviewing a few things while I was away," she explained with a courteous smile that perfectly concealed her true intention. She calmly flipped through the papers, but her mind was racing. When she finally found Eliza's file, her hands trembled slightly. Harper opened it and began to read. Date of birth, 18 years old, no known family, raised in a local orphanage. Every word she read made her feel a growing mix of hope and fear. Eliza's past seemed like a puzzle, wrapped in secrets that needed to be uncovered. Harper knew she couldn't stop there. She needed more information, something that would confirm or refute her suspicions. Without revealing anything to Nathan or Louis, Harper decided to seek out someone who could help her discover more about Eliza's origins. The next morning, Harper met discreetly with a trusted private detective. He was a man of few words, but with an impeccable reputation for solving mysteries. "I need you to find out everything you can about a young woman named Eliza," Harper said, handing over a photo she had managed to obtain surreptitiously. "She grew up in an orphanage, but I need to know where she came from before that." The detective nodded, sensing the urgency in Harper's tone. "I'll start right away," he replied, tucking the photo into his jacket pocket. As the detective began his search, Harper felt her anxiety grow. Every moment of waiting felt like an unbearable burden. She didn't know if she was prepared for what she might discover, but she also knew she couldn't stop now. There was something about that young woman that pulled her back to a painful past, a past she had never been able to leave behind. Back at the hotel, Harper watched Eliza from a distance, trying not to reveal the storm that was brewing in her heart. Every gesture the girl made, every word she exchanged with the other staff, everything seemed loaded with meaning. Harper was on the brink of discovering a truth that would change their lives forever, but she still didn't know if that truth would bring the peace she so desperately sought, or merely reopen old wounds that had never healed. The sun was just rising when Harper met with the detective in a discreet cafe in the city center. She had spent the night wide awake, hoping that the morning would bring some clarity, but all she felt was a mix of anxiety and urgency that she couldn't shake. The detective, a middle-aged man with a face marked by experience and a professional demeanor, arrived punctually, sitting down at the table without any fuss. "Do you have any information about the girl?" Harper asked, trying to keep her voice steady, but the tension in her tone was unmistakable. "Yes," he began, pulling a small folder from his bag. "I've discovered some interesting things. Eliza was found in a park when she was about 3 years old. No documents, no form of identification. She was taken to a local orphanage where she spent most of her childhood. Harper felt a tightness in her chest. Eliza's story sounded disturbingly familiar. "And the bracelet?" she asked, leaning in closer. "Regarding the bracelet," the detective continued, opening the folder and revealing a grainy black and white photo of the necklace. "I found this photo in police records. There are records that she was wearing this necklace when she was found. Apparently, over the years, she made some adjustments to turn it into the bracelet you saw on her, likely due to size or wear." Harper stared at the photo, her eyes filling with tears, her entire body shivering. That necklace was the same one her daughter Evelyn was wearing the day she disappeared. The image of the small pendant, now transformed into a bracelet, was a direct link to the past that Harper feared she would never find again. "This can't be a coincidence," Harper murmured, more to herself than to the detective. She tried to control the emotion in her voice, but her heart was pounding. "I need to be sure. I need to know where she really came from." The detective nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I can continue the investigation, dig deeper into the records and look for more evidence. We can try to trace any additional information about the period before she was found." Harper sighed, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "Do whatever it takes. Money is not an issue. Just bring me answers." The detective jotted down a few notes in his notepad before putting the folder away again. "I'll need a few days, but I can guarantee that I'll have something more concrete soon." Harper nodded, grateful but also terrified of what was to come. As the detective stood up and left the cafe, she was left alone with her thoughts, staring at the coffee cup in front of her. The idea that Eliza could be her lost daughter was both a miracle and a nightmare. Harper knew she was about to uncover a truth that could change everything, and as she watched the people passing by outside the cafe, she realized that, whatever the outcome, her life would never be the same again. A few days passed, and Harper waited anxiously in the detective's office. The room was small, with dark wooden furniture and a narrow window that let in little light. Every minute seemed to drag on as she waited for answers that could change her life forever. Finally, the detective entered the room, carrying a serious expression and a bulky folder in his hands. "I have the information you asked for," he said, sitting down in front of Harper. He opened the folder and pulled out some documents, photos, and reports. "I managed to trace more details about Eliza's past." Harper leaned forward, her heart pounding. "And what did you find out?" The detective took a deep breath before beginning. "Eliza was found in a park, as I mentioned before, but I got more details. She was alone, crying, with only a necklace around her neck. The authorities took her to an orphanage. One of the women at the orphanage took a photo of her, but they were never able to identify her origins or find her parents. He placed an old photo on the table. Harper picked it up with trembling hands. It was a blurred image of a small girl with large, tear-filled eyes, and around her neck was the necklace that Harper would recognize anywhere. "It's her, with the necklace," Harper whispered, her voice barely audible. "It seems it was the only memory she had of her life before the orphanage," the detective continued. Harper felt a wave of emotions overwhelm her. Tears silently rolled down her face as she looked at the photo of the girl who might be her daughter. "Eliza, does she remember anything? Any detail about who might have left her in that park?" Harper asked, her voice faltering. The detective shook his head with a look of regret. "No, she was very young. All she remembers are vague fragments, nothing that could help with identification." Harper lowered her head, feeling the weight of reality. The evidence was there, but a definitive confirmation was still missing. "I'm sure it's her, but I need to do a DNA test," she said, looking at the detective with renewed determination. "That's the only thing that can give me the certainty I need." "I agree," he replied, putting the papers back into the folder. "I can help you arrange it discreetly as you requested." Harper nodded, still processing everything she had just heard. "Do whatever it takes. I just need to know. I need to be sure." As the detective stood up to leave, Harper remained seated, staring at the photo of little Eliza. Her heart was in turmoil, torn between hope and fear. The next step would be crucial, and Harper knew she was on the brink of discovering a truth that could either heal or break her heart once and for all. That same night, Harper could hardly sleep. Thoughts haunted her, spinning in her mind without rest. She knew she needed to do the DNA test, but the fear of discovering the truth left her paralyzed. What if Eliza wasn't her daughter? How would she deal with this new loss? And if she was, how would she explain to Nathan and the rest of the family what she had discovered? The next day, Harper made a decision. She walked through the hotel with a firm purpose, avoiding encountering Nathan or any other staff members. She needed to do this alone, in secret, without raising suspicions. Eliza was in the garden, as she often was during breaks between her shifts, enjoying the tranquility that the place offered. Harper approached slowly, watching the young woman for a moment before announcing herself. "Eliza," she called softly, and the girl looked up, surprised. "Do you have a minute? I'd like to talk to you." Eliza smiled, though a bit nervously. "Of course, Mrs. Cooper," she replied, standing up from the bench. "Shall we walk?" Harper suggested, trying to appear casual. Eliza nodded, and the two began to walk through the garden. Harper chose her words carefully, her heart pounding. "Have you enjoyed working here?" "Yes, ma'am, it's a wonderful place. I feel like I'm learning a lot," Eliza replied, trying to hide the nervousness that Harper's presence always sparked. Harper smiled gently. "I'm glad to hear that. You know, since I returned from my trip, I've been thinking a lot about you, Eliza. Something about you reminds me of someone I knew a long time ago." Eliza looked at her, confused, but remained silent, waiting for Harper to continue. "I know this may sound strange, but I'd like to ask you a favor. It's something very important to me." Harper hesitated for a moment, gathering courage. "I'd like you to take a DNA test." Eliza stopped walking, surprise evident in her eyes. "A DNA test? But why?" Harper took a deep breath, feeling a shiver run through her as she prepared to reveal the truth. "Many years ago, my daughter disappeared. She was 3 years old at the time, and since then, I've never stopped looking for her. When I saw your bracelet, which was identical to the necklace my daughter wore, I began to suspect that maybe you could be her." Eliza was in shock, unsure of what to say. The idea seemed so unbelievable, so far from everything she knew. I don't know what to say, Mrs. Cooper," she said, her body trembling. "I know it's a lot to take in," Harper said, trying to calm her. "But please think about it. If you take the test, we can be sure. I need to know, Eliza." Eliza was silent for a few seconds, processing Harper's words. The possibility of finally discovering something about her past, about who she really was both frightening and tempting. "If this is really important to you, I'll do it," she replied, still stunned. Harper smiled, emotional. "Thank you, Eliza. I promise that regardless of the result, I will always be here for you. I'm sorry to put it so bluntly, I haven't slept well in days." The two women continued to walk through the garden in silence, both lost in their thoughts. Harper knew that Eliza's decision could change everything, and now all that remained was to wait for the result that would bring to light a truth long buried in the past. The days following the DNA test were the longest and most agonizing of Harper's life. She tried to maintain her routine, managing the hotel business and meeting Nathan's expectations, but with each passing minute, her heart filled with hope and fear. Eliza, for her part, continued her work, but there was an evident restlessness in her eyes. Both knew that the test result would change everything. Finally, the day arrived. Harper was in her office staring at the computer screen, but her mind was elsewhere. A soft knock on the door brought her back to reality. It was the detective, holding a brown envelope, his expression serious. "Mrs. Cooper," he said, entering and closing the door behind him. Harper stood up slowly, her hands trembling. "I have the test results." Harper took the envelope with a firm grip, as if holding her own destiny. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the paper as if it might burn in her hands. The detective waited in silence, respecting the gravity of the moment. Finally, Harper opened the envelope, her hands barely able to stay steady. She pulled out the report and read the first few lines, her heart pounding so hard it seemed to echo in the room. Her eyes scanned the words she both feared and longed to see. Genetic compatibility confirmed. Eliza is in fact the biological daughter of Harper and Nathan Cooper. The reality of these words hit Harper like a wave, sending her into a state of shock. She felt her legs weaken and had to lean on the desk to keep from falling. Tears began to flow silently down her face as she tried to process what she had just read. Eliza, the young woman she had watched from afar, whom she had secretly investigated, was indeed her daughter, her little Evelyn, who she had lost so many years ago. I can't believe it," Harper whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "It's really her... Evelyn." The detective nodded, respecting Harper's moment. "I knew this was a possibility, but seeing it confirmed, it's a miracle," he said softly. Harper continued to stare at the paper, tears now falling freely. All those years of pain, of uncertainty, of sleepless nights wondering what had happened to her daughter. All of that was now on the verge of being healed. But at the same time, she felt a new wave of conflicting emotions. How could she tell Eliza? How could she explain everything that had happened? "She needs to know," Harper finally said, raising her eyes to the detective. "But I don't know how to do it." "It will be difficult, but it's what both of you have been waiting for your whole lives, the truth," the detective replied, his expression understanding. "You found her, Harper. She's back with you." Harper nodded slowly, realizing that no matter how hard it would be, this was the truth that needed to be revealed. With the report still in her hands, Harper felt the weight of the responsibility now resting on her shoulders. She knew she couldn't face this alone. She needed Nathan by her side, both to support her and to share the most important moment of their lives. With her heart racing, she left her office and went straight to find her husband, who was in a meeting in the hotel's event hall. Harper waited patiently until the meeting ended, her fingers gripping the report as if it might disappear at any moment. When Nathan finally bid farewell to the other managers and turned to her, he immediately realized that something was wrong. "Harper, what happened?" he asked, concerned, seeing the serious expression on his wife's face. "We need to talk," she said, her voice soft but laden with emotion. "Now, it's about our daughter." Nathan stopped, his expression shifting to a mix of shock and disbelief. "Our daughter? Harper, what are you talking about?" She took his hand, leading him to a more private place where they could talk without interruptions. Once they were in Harper's office, she closed the door behind them and turned to Nathan, her eyes full of tears. "I did a DNA test," she began, her voice trembling. "I had to be sure, Nathan. I couldn't live without knowing, and the result confirmed what I feared, but also hoped. Eliza is Evelyn, our daughter." Nathan stood still, Harper's words echoing in his mind. He blinked a few times, trying to process what he had just heard. "How is this possible, Harper? How did you find this out? Is this real? Are you sure?" "Yes, I am," Harper replied, handing him the report. "It's all here, Nathan. Our daughter is alive. She's been here the whole time." Nathan took the paper with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the words that confirmed the impossible. When he finished reading, he looked at Harper, tears already shining in his eyes. "Oh my God, Harper! Our Evelyn!" They embraced, their emotions finally overflowing. After so many years of uncertainty and pain, they finally had their daughter back. But soon, the initial euphoria gave way to a new concern. "We need to tell her. Let's go now. Where is she?" Nathan said, his voice breaking. "But how are we going to do this? How will she react? My God, my little girl." Harper nodded, wiping the tears from her eyes with her hand. "I don't know either, Nathan, but we need to do this with care, with love. She needs to know that we're here for her, no matter what happens." Later that same afternoon, Harper and Nathan found Eliza in the hotel garden, the same place where so many truths had been uncovered. Eliza noticed the serious look on their faces and felt a chill run down her spine. Something was about to happen, something that would change her life forever. "Eliza, can we talk for a moment?" Harper asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Eliza nodded, feeling the nervousness grow in her chest. "Of course, Mrs. Cooper." They sat down on a nearby bench, Harper on one side, Nathan on the other, as if they were protecting her from something. Harper took Eliza's hands, her words filled with emotion. "Eliza, Nathan and I have something very important to tell you," Harper began, her eyes filling with tears again. "Many years ago, our daughter, Evelyn, was abducted when she was just 3 years old. We spent years searching for her, but we never gave up. And a few days ago, as you know, something made me believe that you could be her." Eliza's eyes widened, surprised and confused. How could that be possible?" Nathan stepped in, placing a comforting hand on Eliza's shoulder. "The DNA test, Eliza, and the result confirmed you are our daughter, our Evelyn." For a moment, Eliza's world stopped. The words coming out of Harper and Nathan's mouths seemed distant, almost unreal. She looked from one to the other, trying to understand, trying to process what it all meant. I'm your daughter?" she asked, incredulous, her voice faltering. This can't be true. I've always been alone." Harper pulled Eliza into a tight embrace, tears falling freely. "You were never alone, my love. We were always looking for you. And now, we've finally found you." Nathan joined the embrace, wrapping both of them in his arms, tears streaming down his face as well. "You're ours, Eliza. You always have been, and we'll never lose you again." Eliza, feeling the sincerity and love in their words, finally let the tears flow. She was scared, confused, but there was also a sense of comfort, something she had never felt before. In that moment, surrounded by Harper and Nathan's arms, Eliza felt that she had finally found the place where she had always belonged. The days following the revelation were a whirlwind of emotions for Eliza. The young woman who had spent most of her life believing she had no family now found herself enveloped by the love of Harper and Nathan, her biological parents. The reality of being the long-lost daughter of the Coopers was still something Eliza struggled to fully accept, but Harper and Nathan's affection and patience were helping her adjust to her new life. Harper made it a point to involve Eliza in every aspect of family life. Each day brought a new discovery, a new piece of the past that she tried to share with her daughter. Eliza found herself surrounded by memories and stories about her childhood, about how she was before the abduction, and about the years of anguish and hope that Harper and Nathan had endured. "You were always such a determined little girl," Harper said one sunny afternoon, as the two strolled through the garden. "Even at just 3 years old, you insisted on doing things your way. It was impossible not to smile at how independent you were." Eliza smiled, still trying to reconcile the stories she was hearing with the life she had lived in the orphanage. "It's hard to believe this is all real," she admitted, looking at the flowers around them. "But I'm starting to understand, to feel that I really belong here." Nathan, for his part, was determined to teach Eliza about the family business. He took her to meetings and showed her how the hotel was run. "You have a great sense of organization," he commented as he watched her examine some financial reports. "I think that's in your blood." Eliza laughed, still getting used to the idea of having a father who cared so much about involving her in the family business. "I still have a lot to learn," she replied humbly, "but I want to help in any way I can." Nathan smiled with pride, seeing the potential Eliza brought to the business. "In time, you'll learn everything you need to, and if you need help, we'll be here to guide you." As the days turned into weeks, Eliza began to feel more comfortable in her new routine. Mornings were filled with lessons about the hotel alongside Nathan. In the afternoons, she spent time with Harper, exploring memories and building new ones. And in the evenings, they gathered for family dinners, moments filled with laughter, stories, and the joy of finally being together. Eliza's integration into the Cooper family was not just a transition for her, but also for Harper and Nathan. They had to learn to be parents again, to balance the desire to protect with the need to let Eliza grow on her own. And Eliza, for her part, had to adapt to the role of daughter, something she had never experienced before. Despite the challenges, the bond between them grew stronger each day. Eliza began to understand that, although she couldn't erase the years she spent without them, she now had the opportunity to build a future with her true family. And as frightening as that was, it was also incredibly exciting. In the back of her mind, Eliza knew there were still many questions to be answered, many mysteries about her past that needed to be unraveled. But for now, she chose to focus on the present, on getting closer to Harper and Nathan, and on discovering her place in the world as the daughter of the Coopers. And as the family bonds grew stronger, she felt more and more at home. As Eliza began to integrate into the Cooper family's life, a silent shadow grew in the heart of Louis, Harper's brother and the hotel's manager. Since the moment Harper and Nathan revealed Eliza's identity, Louis had maintained a stance of apparent neutrality. However, behind his cold facade, feelings of discontent and unease began to simmer. Louis had always been meticulous and controlled, a man who valued order and stability above all else. He had dedicated years to the hotel, ensuring that everything ran perfectly, and now, suddenly, a young, inexperienced woman, whom he had previously criticized without hesitation, was being integrated not only into the family, but also into the business. This made him uncomfortable, as if something was slipping out of his control. One afternoon, while Louis was reviewing the hotel's records in his office, Harper entered to discuss some changes in the staff. Eliza was also present, and Louis couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation seeing her sitting in the chair that he and Harper usually occupied during important meetings. "I was thinking of reorganizing the responsibilities in management," Harper said, looking at Eliza with an encouraging smile. "Eliza could start getting more directly involved with the team. I think it's time she learned about people management." Louis gripped the pen in his hand, maintaining a neutral expression. "Do you think she's ready for that? She's barely begun to understand the basics of the business." Harper gave a patient smile. "She's learning quickly, Louis. With a bit more guidance, I know she'll do very well." Eliza, sensing the tension in the air, tried to intervene. "I really appreciate the opportunity, but maybe Louis is right. There's still a lot I need to learn before taking on more responsibilities." Harper looked at Eliza with affection. "Don't worry, Eliza. You have our support. And Louis will be here to help, won't you, Louis?" Louis forced a smile, though inside he felt his discomfort grow. "Of course, I'll be here to help," he said, but his words sounded hollow even to him. In the days that followed, Louis found himself increasingly bothered by Eliza's constant presence. He watched as she participated in meetings, taking notes, as Harper guided her through the hotel, explaining the details of each department. Louis saw how everyone around them began to accept Eliza as part of the Coopers, but to him, something just didn't feel right. One night, after a long day of work, Louis found himself alone in his office. He looked at the documents scattered on his desk, but his mind was elsewhere. Dark and bitter thoughts began to form. He had worked so hard to keep the hotel at its peak, to ensure the family's success. Now everything seemed to be falling apart with Eliza's arrival. Who was she, after all? A young woman who had appeared out of nowhere and was now taking the place he had fought so hard to protect. "This can't go on like this," Louis murmured to himself, his eyes fixed on the void. He knew he needed to act, but he didn't yet know how. The discontent within him was turning into something more, something he could no longer ignore. As the days passed, the tension between Louis and Eliza began to become noticeable, although both tried to maintain cordiality. Harper and Nathan didn't perceive the growing discomfort, but Eliza's keen eyes caught Louis's cold gaze on several occasions. She couldn't understand why, but she felt that in some way, her presence was threatening something very important to him. Louis, on the other hand, was increasingly determined to protect what was his. And as the days went by, the idea that Eliza might be a threat to the balance he had built began to take shape in his mind, fueling a discontent that would soon manifest in an irreversible way. Days passed, and Harper, always attentive to details, began to notice subtle changes in Louis's behavior. He was more reserved, avoided interactions with Eliza, and in meetings maintained a rigid, almost cold posture. She knew her brother well enough to understand that something was deeply troubling him, but he refused to talk about it. One morning, while having coffee in the hotel's sitting room, Harper observed Louis more closely. He seemed distant, lost in thought, with an expression that mixed frustration with something she couldn't quite identify. When he finally got up to leave, Harper decided it was time to confront him. "Louis, can we talk?" Harper asked, her voice calm but firm. Louis paused at the door, hesitating for a moment before turning to face her. "Sure, Harper. What do you want to talk about?" She approached him, trying to decipher what was going on in his mind. "I've noticed you've been different lately. It seems like something is bothering you and I can't ignore it. What's going on?" Louis looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "Nothing's going on, Harper. I'm just busy dealing with business. You know how it is." Harper crossed her arms, not letting herself be convinced by the superficial excuse. "I know there's more to it than that, Louis. You've been avoiding Eliza, and when you're near her, you can barely hide your discontent. Why? She's your niece, our family. What's going on?" Louis took a deep breath, finally facing Harper. "It's hard for me, Harper. All of this happened so quickly. I spent years taking care of this hotel, making sure everything ran smoothly, and now Eliza is here, being integrated into the business as if she's always been part of it." Harper frowned, trying to understand better. "And that's a problem for you? I thought you'd be happy to see our family reunited, to see Eliza finding her place here." Louis hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's not that I'm not happy for you, Harper, but suddenly, it feels like everything I've done, all the hard work, is being pushed aside, like I'm replaceable. Eliza is taking on responsibilities that used to be mine. It's not easy to accept that." Harper moved closer, touching Louis's arm gently. "Louis, you've always been essential to us, to this hotel. None of this would have worked without you. And Eliza, she's just trying to find her place, just as you did in the past. She's not here to replace you, but to learn, to be part of the family." Louis closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing Harper's words. "I know that rationally, but it's hard not to feel like I'm being pushed aside." Harper sighed, understanding her brother's anguish. "I understand, Louis, but you're not alone in this. We need you, now more than ever. Eliza needs you to guide her, to help her understand how things work. Please, don't see her as a threat, but as part of us, as your niece, as our Evelyn." Harper's words resonated with Louis, who opened his eyes, now filled with a mixture of regret and understanding. I need some time to process all of this, but I promise I'll try. I'll try to see Eliza the way you do." Harper smiled, relieved to have finally broken through the barrier Louis had put up. "That's all I ask, Louis. We're a family, and we need to be together in this." Louis nodded, still introspective, but visibly more at ease after the conversation. As he left the room, Harper remained there, thinking about how the reunion with Eliza had brought both joy and challenges. Days passed after the conversation between Harper and Louis, but the tension remained. Louis tried to adapt to the new dynamic, but something in his behavior still seemed off, as if he was carrying an invisible burden. Harper, though concerned, decided to give her brother space, hoping he would find a way to fully accept Eliza. Meanwhile, the detective Harper had hired continued to investigate the circumstances surrounding Evelyn's disappearance, now known as Eliza. Harper still had unanswered questions, and more she felt that the past was hiding dark secrets that were about to come to light. One rainy afternoon, the detective called Harper, requesting an urgent meeting. His voice on the phone was tense, something Harper couldn't ignore. When she arrived at his office, the detective was serious, with a thick envelope on the desk. "Mrs. Cooper," he began, his voice heavy, "I've made some more discoveries about your daughter's disappearance, and what I found is disturbing." Harper frowned, her heart already racing with anticipation. "What did you find?" The detective pushed the envelope towards her. "I managed to track down witnesses who were in the park the day your daughter disappeared. The information I gathered reveals that the person who left Evelyn in that park was someone close to you." Harper's world seemed to freeze in that instant. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice faltering. The detective sighed, choosing his words carefully. "It all points to Louis, your brother, as the one who took Evelyn to the park and left her there. The witnesses confirmed his presence, and the descriptions matched the evidence I collected." Harper felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. This can't be true," she murmured in disbelief. "Louis would never do something like this." "I understand how this sounds, but the evidence is clear. It seems he was in a fragile emotional state at the time. Maybe fear, maybe jealousy. We can't know for sure what his motivations were, but the facts point to him. Harper stood in silence, the shock overtaking her. Her mind tried to process the information, but everything seemed surreal, like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. "I know this is devastating, Mrs. Cooper," the detective continued, trying to comfort her, "but I had to tell you the truth. Now, it's up to you to decide how to handle this." Harper took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. She thought of Eliza, of how her life had been shaped by that terrible event. And she thought of Louis, the brother who had always been by her side, but who now revealed himself to be a stranger. "I need to confront him," Harper finally said. "I need to hear this from his mouth." The detective nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll be nearby if you need me." Harper stood up, her hands still trembling as she held the envelope. The rain outside seemed to echo the storm brewing inside her. She left the detective's office with her head full of questions and her heart heavy with the truth she had just discovered. Back at the hotel, Harper found Louis in his office, absorbed in papers as usual. She entered unannounced and stood there for a moment, observing him. He looked so normal, so unaware of what she had just discovered. "Louis," Harper called, her voice grave. He looked up, immediately realizing something was wrong. "Harper, what's wrong?" Harper approached, holding the envelope tightly. "I know what you did, Louis," she said, her voice laden with pain and disappointment. "I know you were the one who left Evelyn in that park." Louis's face paled. "Harper, Don't deny it, Louis," she cut him off, her voice now firmer. "I have proof, witnesses who saw you. How could you? Why would you do this?" Louis seemed on the verge of breaking down. He stood up, running his hands over his face, trying to find words, but all he could manage was an agonizing silence. I don't know," he finally murmured, his voice barely audible. "I was afraid of losing everything." Harper felt a wave of nausea at hearing this. "Afraid? Afraid of losing what, Louis? Evelyn was your niece, my daughter." Louis began to cry, something Harper had rarely seen. "I didn't want this to happen, Harper. I was so lost. I never wanted her to get hurt. I thought she'd be found quickly. I was wrong, so wrong." Harper looked at him, her anger mixing with sadness. "You destroyed our lives, Louis. You took our daughter away and let her grow up without a family, without love. And now, after all these years, how can I look at you and see the brother I once loved?" Louis fell to his knees, his hands covering his face as tears streamed down. "Forgive me, Harper, please forgive me." But Harper had no more words. She turned and left Louis there, alone with his guilt and regret. The truth had been revealed, but the cost was unimaginable. Now Harper needed to decide how to move forward, how to protect Eliza from the devastating revelation she had just uncovered. Harper left Louis's office with a heavy heart and a mind in turmoil. She needed to tell Nathan, and together they would have to decide how to face this terrible truth. She walked through the hotel with automatic steps, not even noticing the people around her. All she felt was the growing pain in her chest and the sense that the world was about to collapse again. She found Nathan in the lobby, talking with some employees. When he saw her, his smile instantly disappeared, replaced by a look of concern. "Harper, what happened?" he asked, quickly approaching. "We need to talk, now," was all she could manage to say, her voice trembling. Without waiting for a response, Harper led him to one of the private rooms in the hotel, where they could have the necessary privacy for the conversation that was to follow. As soon as they arrived, Harper closed the door and turned to Nathan, her eyes filled with tears. "Nathan, there's something you need to know. Something I discovered. About Louis." Nathan frowned, confused and worried. "Harper, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "What's—" Harper took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I hired a detective to investigate more about what happened to Evelyn. I needed answers, and what he discovered. Nathan, it was Louis. Louis was the one who took our daughter to the park that day 15 years ago. He left her there." Nathan stood in stunned silence, as if the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. "This can't be true, Louis." "No," He would never do something like that, he said, disbelief in his voice. I know it's hard to believe, Harper continued, tears now streaming freely. But I confronted him and he confessed, Nathan. He did it out of fear of losing his position at the hotel, fear of losing control. Nathan took a step back, as if he had been struck. This doesn't make sense, Harper. Louis has always been by our side. He helped us search for her. How could he hide something so terrible? Harper held Nathan's hands, seeking strength to continue. He was afraid, Nathan. Afraid that Evelyn would take his place, that he would lose everything he had built. But what he did is unforgivable. Nathan remained silent for a long moment, trying to process the unimaginable betrayal by his own brother. Finally, he nodded, his expression hardening with a rarely shown anger. We need to confront him together, Harper. He needs to understand what he's done and the consequences that will come from it. Harper agreed, and together they returned to Louis's office. When they entered, they found Louis still on his knees on the floor, his hands covering his face. Upon hearing the door open, he looked up, and upon seeing Nathan, his expression became even more desperate. Nathan, please forgive me, Louis pleaded, his voice choked with emotion. I was out of my mind back then. I was so afraid of losing everything. I never wanted any of this to happen. Nathan approached him, his anger burning in his eyes. You took our daughter from us, Louis. You made us live in hell for 15 years. How can you ask for forgiveness for something like that? How can you even think that I would forgive you? Louis lowered his head, tears streaming freely. I know I was wrong, Nathan. I know I deserve your hatred, but I never wanted her to get hurt. I thought she'd be found quickly, that everything would be fine. Harper, still in shock, shook her head. But it wasn't fine, Louis. Nothing was fine. Evelyn grew up without us, without her family, because of your selfishness. Louis sobbed, completely broken. I don't know what to say. I was wrong, I know. I'm ready to face the consequences of what I did. Nathan remained silent for a moment, the anger still burning in his chest, but now mixed with a deep sadness. You destroyed our family, Louis. I don't know how we'll move forward from this, but one thing is certain. You'll have to pay for it. Harper, struggling with the pain she felt, nodded. We will do whatever it takes to protect our daughter, Louis, and that starts now. As Harper and Nathan left Louis's office, both were deeply shaken, but they knew there was still a decision to be made. Nathan was consumed by a rage he had never felt before. His brother's betrayal, the man he had trusted blindly, had destroyed years of their lives, causing their daughter to grow up without her parents. He knew he couldn't simply let this go. Shortly after, Louis was called to the hotel's main lobby. He appeared hesitant, knowing something terrible was about to happen. When he arrived, he found Nathan waiting for him, fists clenched and an expression of contained fury. Nathan, please, Louis began, trying to appeal to whatever bond remained between them. I know I was wrong, but we're brothers. We don't need to resolve this way. But Nathan was no longer willing to listen. The rage that had accumulated over all those years, combined with Louis's recent confession, was a storm he could no longer contain. You took everything from us, Louis. You made our daughter suffer because of your own greed and selfishness. And now you want me to just forgive you? Without warning, Nathan advanced, his clenched fist striking Louis hard in the face. The impact sent Louis staggering backward, falling to the floor. The physical pain was intense, but it didn't compare to the pain of knowing he had lost everything: his brother's trust, his family's love, and his own dignity. Harper, who had followed Nathan, rushed to stop things from getting worse. Nathan, no! She shouted, grabbing his arm. This won't solve anything. Nathan stepped back, breathing heavily, while Louis remained on the floor, his face marked by the punch. You'll pay for this, Louis, Nathan said, his voice filled with bitterness. I swear you will. It was then that the sound of approaching sirens cut through the tense air. Harper had called the police before confronting Louis, knowing that things could spiral out of control. Within minutes, the police officers entered the hotel, quickly heading to where they were. Mr. Louis Cooper, one of the officers called as two others approached with handcuffs. You're under arrest for kidnapping and concealing a minor. Louis didn't resist. He knew this was the end. He felt the cold, heavy handcuffs close around his wrists as the officers lifted him from the floor. Harper and Nathan watched in silence, both feeling the weight of the decision they had made. Louis gave Harper one last look, but she turned her face away, unable to bear what she saw. Not her brother anymore, but a stranger who had destroyed their lives. As the police led him out of the hotel, Nathan and Harper stood side by side watching in silence. Nathan was still furious, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. Harper, on the other hand, felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief in knowing that justice had finally been served for their daughter, but sorrow in realizing that the person she had trusted for so many years was capable of such a devastating betrayal. As the sirens faded away, taking Louis to face the consequences of his actions, Harper felt tears silently run down her face. "I never imagined it would end this way," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan, still in shock, just held her close. "Neither did I, Harper. But we did what we had to do. Now we need to take care of Eliza and make sure she knows she's safe, that this will never happen again." Harper nodded, trying to focus on the future. Even though the past was still very present, they had lost so much, but now they had a chance to rebuild their lives without the ghosts that had haunted them for so long. And with that in mind, Harper promised herself that she would do everything to ensure that Eliza had the life she always should have had, a life surrounded by love, protection, and truth. Time passed since Louis' arrest, and although the wound of betrayal was still open, the Cooper family knew they needed to move forward. The shocking revelation and the painful farewell to their brother and uncle had left deep scars, but Harper and Nathan were determined not to let the past destroy the future they were building with Eliza. One afternoon, as the sun set over the hotel's vast garden, Harper, Nathan, and Eliza gathered on the veranda where they often sat to reflect on recent events. The gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers, creating an atmosphere of peace that contrasted with the emotional storms they had faced. "I know everything that's happened has been really difficult," Nathan began, looking at Eliza with a soft but concerned smile. "But we want you to know that, despite everything, you are part of this family, and you always will be. We're ready to leave the past behind and move forward together." Eliza, still processing everything she had learned about her life, looked at her parents with eyes full of emotion. "I never imagined that one day I'd have a real family," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm still getting used to the idea, but I want to be part of this. I want to help build a future with you." Harper moved, reached out to Eliza, holding her hand affectionately. "You're already part of us, Eliza, and now that we're together again, we want you to know that everything we have is yours too. This hotel, these gardens, all of this is part of our legacy, and now it's part of yours too." Eliza smiled for the first time in her life, feeling like she truly belonged somewhere. "I'm still learning about the business, but I want to be by your side, learn from you, and help make this hotel an even more special place." Nathan nodded, proud of his daughter's determination. "And we'll be here to guide you every step of the way. You have so much talent, Eliza, and in time, I'm sure you'll be ready to take on even greater responsibilities." Harper watched the two with a heart full of hope. "What's done is done," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "We can't change what happened, but we can choose how we move forward. And the choice we're making is to be together as a family, facing whatever comes." Eliza felt tears forming, but this time they were tears of joy. "Thank you," she said, looking from one to the other. "Thank you for accepting me, for loving me even after everything. I promise I'll do my best to honor this family." As the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, the three of them remained there, sitting together, sharing the silence of those who had found peace after a long storm. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Harper, Nathan, and Eliza felt ready to face it with heads held high, hearts light, and spirits renewed. The Cooper family had been shattered once, but now, rebuilt on the foundation of love and truth, they were stronger than ever. And as they planned their next steps, they knew the future they were creating together would be bright and full of new possibilities. The darkness that had hovered over their lives was finally lifting, giving way to a new beginning, a beginning that, this time, they would embrace together, as the family they were always meant to be. As time went on, the Cooper Hotel, once a place marked by dark secrets and hidden tensions, began to transform. The weight of the tragedy that had haunted its walls for so many years was now giving way to something new, a sense of renewal, hope, and love. The employees who once worked in an atmosphere of rigid formality and caution now felt more at ease, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. Genuine smiles and lively conversations became common in the hallways and behind the scenes, reflecting the change happening in the hearts of the family who ran the hotel. Harper, who once carried a constantly watchful and worried expression, now walked through the halls with a renewed lightness. Her posture was more relaxed, and the serenity in her eyes was evident to everyone who met her. She made a point to greet each employee, to check in on them, not just as a boss, but as someone who truly cared about everyone's well-being. Nathan, in turn, spent more time with the people who made the hotel a success. He was no longer the austere businessman focused solely on numbers and results. Now, he actively participated in events, organized lunches and dinners with the staff, and made sure to listen to suggestions, making the work environment more collaborative and welcoming. And then there was Eliza, the young woman who had finally found her place in the world. She had fully integrated into the hotel's routine, taking on responsibilities and contributing fresh ideas that soon began to bear fruit. The garden, her place of refuge, had become an even more special spot, where she often met with the team for creative brainstorming sessions or simply to enjoy the natural beauty that flourished there. "I was thinking of creating an annual event in the garden," Eliza suggested during a meeting with Harper and Nathan. "Something that involves the community, that brings people from outside to see our space and share stories. We could have live music, art exhibitions, something that celebrates life and the connection between people." Harper and Nathan exchanged a look, proud of the daughter who had become such a talented and full of ideas young woman. "I think it's a wonderful idea," Harper replied, smiling. "Let's make it happen." The hotel, once a place that harbored painful secrets, was now a place where people gathered to create new memories, where laughter echoed through the halls, and where each new day was an opportunity to build something beautiful. The guests, many of whom were long-time clients, began to notice the change in the atmosphere. They commented among themselves about how the hotel seemed more alive, more welcoming than ever. "There's something different here," said an elderly guest to Harper during an event by the pool. "I've always loved this place, but now I feel there's a new energy, something that really touches the heart." Harper smiled, feeling the warmth of the woman's words. "Yes, things have changed a lot around here," she replied, looking over at Eliza, who was on the other side of the garden, talking with a group of young guests. "And it's all because of family, of the love we found again." The Cooper Hotel had become not just a place of luxury and elegance, but a true home for everyone who passed through its doors. A place where the pain of the past had been healed by the power of forgiveness, love, and the hope for a better future. The darkness had been dispelled, and in its place was a light that shone brightly, guiding everyone to happier, more fulfilling days. And so, the hotel, once marked by secrets, became a sanctuary of renewal, where each new day brought promises of joy, and where every visitor could feel the truth that here, love and hope had finally found their place.